Okay, we will begin. Thank you for coming. We will begin shortly. I will be the host for this. My name is Misa KOYAMA. So today we will talk about the remaining issues and the reason why we demand compensation. So first, let me introduce myself. I am a freelance journalist. I used to work at Mainichi Shimbun, but after I left, I have been doing freelance since. I was responsible for learning about the KUROIWA, the Black Rain. And before we begin, I'd like to pass on a message from the Japan campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. We have Mr. Terumi Tanaka with us today, and in his Nobel acceptance speech, he touched on state compensation. And because of this, there has been more attention given to this issue. However, today I'd like to delve deeper into why this is necessary. We will review Mr. Terumi's speech and analyze why he said what he said. So to recap, the two demands that the Nihon Hidankyo has is one, state compensation, and two, to abolish nuclear weapons. We need to make sure that we will not produce any more hibakusha. And then in the second half of today's session, although there has been a law passed to compensate the A-bomb sufferers, this is not nearly enough. And so we'll reflect on state compensation and how the state has not made amends to its people. So I'd like to think about what state compensation even means with you together. The number one thing I want to talk about today at this forum is not just through the lens of atomic bomb sufferers, but actually through victims of war in general. The reason why I say this is because, yes, state compensation is necessary. But why should the people suffer for a war that the government started? There are more sufferers than just the hibakusha. Many civilians lost their lives and their homes. We have invited Mr. Terumi Tanaka, as well as a lawyer, Mr. OKUBO, who knows more about nuclear abolition. We also have Mr. ADACHI from the Hiroshima Bar Association. And we have many panelists today. There's going to be a lot of information, as well as time for questions and comments. But I don't want to go over time, so that's why I'm speaking quite quickly. All right. Sorry for speaking for so long, but now let's get right into it. Now, I'd like everyone to introduce themselves. All right, let's talk about the Nobel Peace Prize and the ceremony. Now, maybe we don't even need Tanaka-san to introduce himself. We all know who he is. He is famous for giving the Nobel acceptance speech. He mentioned state compensation. Let's ask why he mentioned this and why it's important to him. Mr. Tanaka-san, you have the floor. Oh, do I have to speak that quickly? All right. So, the Nihon Hidankyo vowed to keep their activities going, to never repeat what happened to us. The atomic bomb itself is solely responsible for the majority of our suffering, and we believe that our government is responsible for the atonement. That is how we feel. That being said, when we talk about individual responsibility, that statement actually did not come to light until we began our activities. The government only started talking about individual responsibility once we started advocating for state compensation. That's how I understand the situation. Personally,
国家保障というのを使うのはですね、私の記憶だと、戦争、軍人軍属ですね。軍人軍属に対する、国家保障が行われるんです。これは
state compensation was given to those who were in the military as a way of showing thanks. So they were able to receive this compensation through the government because they were protected by law.
それが多分日本の普通の法律の中で国家保障というのが使われたのは初めてじゃないかと。
And that was one of the first times that state compensation became relevant to my memory. But the stance of the government is to not give state compensation. There was some backlash given even to those who were in the military. However, they are protected by law. And so compensation is a very strong word for the government and its people. And unlike the state compensation that we are asking for in terms of atonement, the compensation given to those who were in the military was of a different kind. The way the government saw it was that people were forced to go into war. They were required to join the military if they were men of a certain age. So as a sort of employer, the government felt responsible for providing a certain pay to those who were in the military during the war. However, through the lens of the law, sorry, I know that this is getting long.
国交省というのが最初に使われたのは多分カナダのに移民してた人の財
I
産が
believe that the term state compensation first came to be to those who were Canadian immigrants.
それに対する裁判があって、
There
最高
was
裁まで行って、最高裁の言葉として
a lawsuit that was taken to the Supreme Court,
ちょっと忘れちゃった。
and I forgot what happened, the specifics.
およそ戦争の被害についてはでしたかね、生命、身体、財産といえども、
But I believe we call this in terms of life and property.
その時に国家保障というのは初めて、戦争被害者
These
に対する
key words were taken up
出てきたんだという
to the Supreme Court,
思って
and thus a new law was
で
born.
すけども、今度原爆の被害者の
Now, going back to the atomic bomb
法律です
survivors
ね、
and
原
the
爆
law
原子爆弾被爆者の
then
健なんて健康に関するだったかな。
perhaps
医療
regarding
に関する法律、医
um,
療に関する法
the
律というの
medical
は
care,
できるわけですけども、
this
そ
law
の時
called the
に
A-bomb sufferers medical
出
care
され
law
た
was enacted,
軍人軍属の被害に対する国家保障という言葉が使っておりますから、
and this was a totally different thing from the state compensation that people in the military received.
けども、原子爆弾の被害は戦闘による被害だから国が保障しなければいけない。で、国家保障の法律を作れというふうに要求をした。しかし、国は
We appealed for the
そ
state
れは
to provide the medical care
取らないで、
because we were victims.
健康に医療法は放射線の被害に対して、被爆者の放射線の被害に対して国が援護するんだという考え方で出したのであって、
However, there came
国
a
交省ですね、
conclusion
いうふ
that
うに言ってきた。
the
で、
government
で
would
です
provide
けれども、
aid
韓
for
国
those who
の
experienced
孫
damage
信
from
徒さんですね、
radiation.
孫信徒さんの手帳の
From
問題、
Shinto
そ
So
れが問題にな
from
って、そ
Korea,
れが裁判になって、
he sued the government.
手帳を発行することになるんですね。
And because of this,
最高裁の
the Supreme Court
言
ruled
葉の中に国家保障的、被爆者医療法の中にはですね、国家保障的
that
名誉
atomic bomb survivors would receive certificates
という言葉が入った。
and
で、
that
そ
there
のこ
was
とで、
consideration
国家
for
保障が
them
ないと頑張ってきた政府もですね、国家
through
的保障の
state
ある
compensation.
配慮のある法律だと、いうことを
Through the lens of the
最高裁から
government,
言われたので、これ
this
は大変
was
だということになったんです。
deemed as
それ
somewhat
を
generous
完全に
towards
否定
the
したいと
survivors.
いう考え方だと思うんですけども、原爆被害者の被害に対して、基本問題懇談会、基本問題懇談会という7人の、学者知識人を集めて判断を、求めるということで、いろいろ審議がされて、そして基本婚の答申という格好で、出されてくる、問題の中に国交省が否定されることになるんですよね。で、それがだからきっかけになって、基本婚が議論されている頃から被団協の中で、被害に対する保障の問題についての議論を深めて、
And then
基本要求という
a consultation committee was born to address the issues that the atomic bomb sufferers encountered. And it came to the conclusion among the hibakusha, the survivors, that state compensation should be received. There was nothing included in the Japanese constitution that would address the issues that the survivors were facing afterward.
というふうに私は考えている。というのは
That's how I see it.
日本の投資の議論をするときなんかも、もうすでに、
And when we talk about these fundamental issues,
受け入れて発言もしてきた。
I bring up what the committee thought of, what all the other members experienced, and how the government ignored our pleas.
国家無党籍。国家無党籍という考え方が、もうアメリカにもある、民主国家と呼ばれているんですね。
So we are considered
国民はその損害を問えないという、賠償を問えないと
a
いう国家無党籍というのが、
democratic country.
国家無党籍という考え方があるんだということを、知りまして、
However,
これはだから、日本の政府も、国家保障ができないというのは国家無党籍の古い考え方がそのまま、民主的戦後のね、日本の政府の考え方にも残っているんじゃないかというふうに思っております。ですからそういう意味ではその民主国家と言われている現代において、
however, this is not something that was shown to the government's actions as a enactment of the principle of state liability in 1947, even if an individual suffers damage as a result of state power, the state is not responsible.
使うものと使われるものの関係でないわけなので、
So this relationship
当然国家保障というのは、認められる
is quite complicated.
というふうに思ってずっと来たんですね。で、このオスロの、
Now,
証言の時に
at
前半を
the ceremony in Oslo,
行ってきてですね。で、
I made sure that my voice was heard.
日本の方の顔が見えてこっちに
I remember seeing the faces in the
民主
audience
国家の人たちの代表だと。で、この民主国家の
thinking that these are all people who are leaders of a democracy.
認められてない国があるんだっていうのがパッとこう頭に浮かんで、
And it occurred to me that I should make my case and I should repeat my point, how this is a national and international issue. We need to rethink how we address the scars from war, what the government does. So you actually ad-libbed that, Mr. Tanaka? In some ways, yes. That thought just crossed my mind when I saw the faces of my colleagues. I felt like now was the only time that I had. If I knew that if I had to explain things beforehand, then I had to provide more information, and that would be a bit tedious. So I just said it on the spot. Oh, so Mr. Tanaka, you said that when it wasn't included in the previously approved script. Thank you for talking about your experience and what the Nihon Hidankyo was. So now, considering this speech, let's go on.
So I'd like to hear the feedback and also the meaning of the state compensation he just touched upon. But first, I'd like to hear the feedback on his speech. Hello, everyone. Now, just been introduced. I am the chair, president of Japan Association of Lawyers. I'm OKUBO. I'd like to explain Japan Association of Lawyers against nuclear arms, what we do. We are support Hibakusha and also to abolish nuclear weapons. This is a civil organization. And also after the catastrophic damage had in Fukushima, we like to eliminate the nuclear power plants as well. This is also one of our purpose of our organization. Last year, we commemorated 30 years of establishment. And as has been mentioned, we are trying to legalize support of Hibakusha and try to eliminate nuclear weapons. So that's our aim. So when the Hidankyo received the Nobel Peace Prize, we were very happy and pleased as it was our incident. I didn't get to go to Oslo. However, as Terumi Tanaka mentioned, the public administration has done nothing. I wondered if it was actually in his speech draft, but I guess it was not in his draft. However, amongst his thought and mind, as he mentioned earlier, the public administration has done nothing for Hibakushas. So that kind of feeling was reflected on his, or like has increased more during he was giving a speech. And try to make a nuclear-free world. And that also he mentioned. So two things I heard. One thing I thought was including Hibakusha and also other victims of wars, Japanese government haven't compensated them based on the state compensation they should. And also relying on the nuclear weapons, they haven't made efforts to eliminate them. So we have to understand the current conditions. Because of that, that's the reason why Nobel Peace Committees have awarded the Nihon Hidankyo the Nobel Peace Prize. What is the idea of state compensation I'd like to touch upon? First of all, in a military trial, as a responsibility who had wars, when there were damage, the state should be compensating. That is a general or basic idea of state compensation. Regardless what they did, if there was a damage, they should be compensating. Against this, the public administration was against this idea. Why they were against? Because this is something about whose responsibility the war they had. Japan had a war. So in the history, we talked about we have a democratic country. However, during World War II, we did not have a democratic country. We had an emperor, so we had a monarchy. And we had all these like areas and also the atomic bombings, and we had all these damage. Against that, we have to search the responsibility. Then we have, if the emperor's responsibility is not being taken, there is a word the king doesn't do anything bad. Does not command anything evil. So we have to think, so currently we're in a democratic country, so we do choose our leader. So everything has to be done according to our agreement as a civil society or civilians. However, when they're the king, they don't have such concept of being responsible for civilians or civil society. So that's why they don't even think about it. So that is the basic idea of public state compensation. So the United States was the one dropped the atomic bomb. However, if we try to compensate everyone, we're gonna go in red because we had atomic bomb-related trials, and we came to the point we have to do something about hibakshas. But now at the court, it has to be something about the states or at the diet. So at the court, the state started the war, so they had to be responsible. It is a very important point, I think. So I'd like to stop here. Thank you very much. Mr. Adachi, what do you think? Thank you very much. I am Adachi Shuichi. Briefly, I'd like to introduce myself. As it was pointed out, since I became a lawyer, I have been involved in atomic bombing survivors who got radiated, and also receiving the atomic hibakusha certificate, bomb survivors certificates, and also the Nagasaki air bombing survivors lawsuits, and also others. So the state's compensation is something Hidankyo was always demanding. Whether or not it is state's compensation, such as medical treatment, that has become a problem. It went to the Supreme Court in 1978. It should be given the state's compensation. However, it was told that they had to take into consideration of state's compensation. However, the time passed. As Terumi Tanaka mentioned in his speech, state's compensation haven't been provided. So I believe it was emphasized well. We say so, however, at the atomic bombing lawsuit, we are always trying to rely on state compensations available, and we've been getting that. We've been having some we have been working on it, being successful sometimes. However, it's 12 years. Within 12 years after the atomic bombings, those who died haven't been compensated at all by the state. If the state is not taking the responsibility, or it hasn't been done, and it is true. That's how I received. And there was also the report session in Hiroshima. Mr. Tanaka said that what Mr. Tanaka said, I was listening to at the time, and he always explained to us quite clearly about the history and others. However, he talked about the Korean Peninsula problems and what the United States dropped the bombings and so on. When not touched upon was making me feel a little. I was very little bit sorry that he never touched the bomb. However, insufficiency of the Japanese government taking its responsibility was useful. So I'd like to move on to Mr. Kuroiwa. So talking about the trial and went to the Supreme Court. So we were not able to win the lawsuit. However, we were able to talk about, and I was encouraged by the talk. And both the majority and opposition party, we were able to have an opportunity. And we can do this after 80 years passed since the atomic bombings. And there is no laws, and there's no designated committees. So I'm not sure whom I should be negotiating with. I don't know which ministry or whom I should be consulting with or communicating with. So, according to Mr. Tanaka, so I really welcomed his speech that was given at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. I guess he was talking that we have to bear this moment. What I found very important in his speech was that he mentioned about hibakusha, current hibakusha. So it should be more like a social compensation. It's not the state's compensation. It is a relationship between the social and state's compensation. So when we talk about social compensations, can be something more like a luxury. So state's compensation is something for something against a real hardship, and something for the livelihood. So if somebody has hardship, they often say that they should just get the compensation or be supported. For example, in Germany, they think that it's not the state's compensation, but it's the state's repatriations. Reparations. However, in the States and UK, they think that they had a correct wars. So against that, they don't think that that they were right to do the wars. However, they were damaged, so they're going to compensate some. So they're not going to have a liberation. However, they're not going to do it for the loss. Because we can't say that that was right to do this war, or we can't justify. So that's why they were talking about social compensation, and that was not the state's compensation. And also the airways damage. So airways damage shouldn't be included in a social compensation. Because if it's a social compensation, it doesn't be a relief on the livelihood. It is really a big problem and a big issue. We are talking about to support those who have a hardship of the like livelihood. So we do have a big assignment. Thank you very much.
So first, maybe we can start addressing the definition of what national compensation is, state compensation is. So what is state compensation as defined by the Nihon Hidankyo? Maybe we can touch upon what would be included or what would be considered state compensation.
中身はですね、原爆の場合で言えば原爆によって生じた被害のすべて、精神的な被害も含めてすべて。
So when we talk about state compensation, we're talking about the state having responsibility for all of the damage that was experienced by the atomic bomb survivors, including the mental health aspects. Anybody else have any comments to add to that? So the fundamentals of state compensation is that when the citizens are hurt, then we have to think about what caused it. Sometimes this can be divided into two parts. One is property damage and one is not. In terms of the property damage, what does this lead to? What does this entail? So, for example, someone who had an income, but then due to governmental reasons, this is cut off. This can affect one's livelihood and physical aspects. However, this is extremely difficult to put into numbers. So if we think about this through the eyes of the law, the government then needs to build upon the situation then and define them again in modern definitions. Thank you. So sometimes this topic comes up, but then when we discuss the issue of enduring the damage of the war, in December of 1980, a committee was established. And this is backed up by the Ministry of Health and Welfare as an argument for acceptance of war damage. And what's written in this law is that in a state of an emergency, no matter what the individual endured, everything will fall under something that is just a common occurrence, a result of the war, and the state shall not be responsible for compensation. When I first read this, I was extremely shocked. So everyone must just endure and accept the damages inflicted by the war. Even now, this comes up during trials. I do feel like a government that does not pay for the damage inflicted in the past will not compensate for anything that happens in the future. I do think that this falls for many types of victims and not just ones who endured the war. Through this,
空襲の、賠償責任を求めて、名古屋空襲訴訟というのを起こしまして、これでこれがまた最高裁判所まで行って、最高裁判所の
this was brought up to the Supreme Court in 1987. And this was about the air raids that happened in Nagoya. When we think about the victims of the war, of the damage inflicted by the war, in a state of emergency, every citizen must accept their fate on an individual stance and not ask for the government for any help. They argued that to give compensation for the damage and the deaths through air raids, then this was unconstitutional. That was their argument. And I love how that Mr. Tanaka called out this hypocrisy during his Nobel Prize speech. Upon looking at these examples, we see how this theory came to be of this individual responsibility. As you talked about before, maybe we can go back to the trials regarding the atomic bombs, the damage inflicted by the atomic bomb. Maybe we can talk more about what went on during these trials. Maybe some of you watched the TV drama on NHK. I really think this was well done. So we talk about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and whether this would be considered illegal under international law. And the question was whether the United States would be liable in terms of providing damages. And if not, would Japanese citizens be able to hold the Japanese government responsible? And this was deemed unconstitutional. The answer was that atomic bomb victims would not be able to sue the United States for the damages. So if we look at the Japanese law, it would be responsible to sue the United States government. Now, when it comes to the Japanese citizens suing the Japanese state, that also would be impossible as well. And the reason being that just because that damage was inflicted on the people through something that the government did,
しかも敗戦国の被害者が勝利した国、戦勝国の政府に対して求めてくるなんて、そんなこと認められるわけないじゃないかっていうね。
They were the ones that lost the war.
被告の国の主張だった。
And history is written usually by the winners.
認めるんですね。だからもう一つは国際法上、戦争の
And
被
then
害者が
another point through international law
があるかって、そういう国際法もないって話なんです。
is that
要するに東京
no such
地裁
law
の
exists in the
原爆裁
first
判は
place.
原爆
We
投下
talk
違法
about
だ
the
っていうふうに
atomic
言う
bomb
けれど、結局
trials
被爆者に対する損害賠
surrounding
償
this
請求
issue,
法的な権利はないんだっていうふうに言って
but
しまうんですね。
it was ruled
けれど
that
も
the
そ
hibakusha
れだ
don't
け
have
じ
any
ゃ被爆
constitutional
者に対
rights,
して
whether
裁
to
判所は
sue the
ダ
United
メだ
States
ね。
government
原
or
爆
the
被害に
Japanese
対して
government.
被爆者の実相に照らして、それだけじゃ自分たちの良心が傷んでしまう。ということで出て
However,
くる
that
の
being
が一つの
said,
貧困
if we
法
look
です。
at this from a
でそこのところはですね、しっかり見とかなければいけないんですね。
through
だから
the
原
lens
爆
of
裁判は
morals,
私は勇気ある判決だっていうふうに思っています。
things are
一つは
different.
アメリカという戦勝国を投下した原爆裁判、これは違法だ
While
と
it
いう
is
ふうになってます。
unfortunate
もう
that
一つ裁判所に見た
under
けれども
law,
政治の責
nothing
任
could
なん
be
とかしな
done
さいよっていうふうに言ってます。
to appeal
これ
for
でもその通りなんで
responsibility
すね。け
on
れ
the
ど
United
も
States
その
or the state of
政
Japan.
府はじゃあ何やってるかっていうと、原爆と投下、これは違法だっていうふうには彼は言わなかったんです。でむしろ投下したことは日本の
Damages
いやアメリカ
cannot
の
be
国民
provided
の兵士
because
の
there
被害を少なく
is
したという
nothing
こう
in
いう
the
こと
rule
が
book
出てくるんです
talking
ね。
about
でそして、
how
現在も
dropping an
核
atomic
抑止論
bomb
ということで
on
ア
a
メリカは核の
country
傘に依存
is
している、こういう話
illegal.
になる。
At the
そ
same
して国家
time,
保障については
we
先ほど来
rely
こ
on
ちら
the
で
United
話をしてい
States
る通り、
currently under the
10
nuclear
年のことで
umbrella,
もって拒否するんですね。
as well
だ
as
から
we cannot
勝
forget the
勝
existence
手に戦争を
of
始めと
the
いて、
law
戦
that
争に反対する人たちみんな殺しとい
states
て、
that
戦争
an
をやって、
individual
その被害
is
発生した人たちに対して、
responsible
こ
in
んなの戦
terms
争
of
なんだからしょうがないだ
emergencies.
ろうなってこういう発想なんですよ。こ
So
れがね、
then
今
the
私たち
result
の
would
政府の
be
取っている基
that
本的なスタン
it's
ス
too
です。
bad and there's not
で
much we
そ
can
れ
do.
を原爆裁判は今からもうあれですね、70年前になるわけだ、
Now,
68
this
年前になるわけ、そ
happened
れを提起
about
したという
60,
ことは
almost
私たち
70
はしっ
years
かり見てお
ago.
かなければいけないけれども、
But
けれども原爆裁判が提起した問題、これはまだ解決されていないというこ
we
とにつ
still
いても
haven't
私た
really
ちは
touched
しっかりと
base
認識しておく必要
with
があるんじゃ
the
ないか、
problems
その
that
よう
were
に思い
brought
ま
up
す。
during this trial.
ありがとうございます。これまでの経緯が大変よく分かってきたというか、いろいろこう
Thank you very much. You're able to learn
焦
like
点が
how
見え
it
てき
how
た
it
な
has
というふうに
been
思っております。ここでちょ
and
っと中澤
how
にお聞き
the
したいんで
state's
すけれども、先ほど
compensation
冒頭でも
hasn't
言
been
った日
realized.
韓の歩みといいますか、そ
I'd
の
like to
どん
see
なふう
like
にしてこう
how
話をされていた
Nihon
かということがあ
Hidankyo
ると思うんで
has
すけれど
been
も、ただいまだにですね、
have come
こう
so
官房
far
長
has come
として
so
も
far.
実現していないし、受任論も
We
ずっ
know
と今ま
that
でに
the
達成は残念ながら、こ
theory
うい
of
う制度に対し
acceptance
てです
that
ね、日本被団協
state
の
compensation
は
has
と
been
いいますか、田
realized.
中さんとしてはどんなふうに立ち向かって、どんな運動を続けて
How
こら
has
れたの
you
か、
how have you
ぜひ
been
お聞かせい
working
ただいてもよろ
against
しいで
this
すか。
situation, Mr. Tanaka? And what kind of activities you've been involved?
長い間、死亡したに対する保障がね、具体的
So the
な日
compensation
本被団協
against
が要請する
that was something Nihon
法律
Hidankyo
案ですね。
has
法
been
律案の中にあっ
demanding and
て、そ
proposing
の援護法とは
as a law.
被団協は言ってたわけ、その援護法を
It
制定
is
せよという
something,
運
it's
動
a
を
relief
ず
law,
っと一貫してやってたんです。
and
で、
this
そ
is
れは、
something we've been working on.
何年になるかな。
It was 94, 1994.
94年に3つ目の法律
The third
一つは
law,
医療法です。もう一つは
one was the
生活の
medical treatment
保
law,
護
and
とか
another
ね、援護
one
が
was for the
特別措
livelihood.
法っていうのが
It was a special
出
measure.
てるんですけど、その2つが長い間原
The
則に法とし
two
て生きてたんですけど
was,
も、
the two has been a
その
law,
2つも
and both
国
of
家保障じゃ
them,
ないので、だから、国家保障をきちっ
both
とや
neither
っ
of
て、
them were like
そして
state
なおかつ死亡
compensation.
者の保障をこういう格好で、例えば遺族年金を出せとかです
So
ね、
something
教育費
like
を
a
支給
try
せ
to
よと
get
か、そういう
pension
条文
for
が入っ
those
た援護法、
the
被
vast
団
way,
協が要求する援護法っていうのをず
and
っと
also
要
the
求してきてたん
relief
です。
benefit.
で、それが95年のにを迎えるようになって運動が
And in
一番
1995, we
被団協
had
の運動がですね、
activity.
も含めて大きな運動になったん
It
です
was a
ね。
big
で、それ
movement.
を受けて 政府も何かせざるを得なくなって、
And including that, the administration had to do something, so they
で、
established,
それは原
they
発被害
made
者に
the
対する
third
援護法、援護に関す
law,
る法律
and it was
という
something to do
こ
with
とがあったんで
relief.
すね。で、
So
そ
it
の
is a
中
relief
で、
law.
むしろもう
So amongst them,
被害全体に対して保障しないよというような
basically, they
ことを
don't
もうきちっと明
compensate
文化する
against
た
the
めに、
damage
放射
overall.
能の被害はさっき言いましたけども、
So
他
mention
の
about the damage
き
by
ちんとの被害者
radiation,
との
that was also already
特別な面
clarified.
があるという
However,
でそれを特別の被害として、特
that
別の
was
被害とし
that's
て
been regarded as a special
認
damage,
めるけども、全
and
体
that's
を
been admitted
国家
or
保障とは
recognized.
しないということ
However,
なん
they
です。
don't compensate at
で
the state.
どう言ったらいいんだろう。
How should
で
I put
で
in
そ
this
こで
word?
実はその運動がですね、
This
国
our
家保障の援護
activities
法
or
国家
movement
保障の援護法ってに言ってきたんですけど
to
も、
have the
援護法というところだけ
state's
新しい法律を取り出
compensation
したん
law.
ですね。被爆者
We were
原爆被
trying
害
to have
者
a
に対
relief
する援護
law
に関
of
する法律を。
state's
だか
compensation
ら
law. However,
よ
just the
く理
relief
解でき
law
なかっ
itself
た
became
人た
independent.
ちは、
So
被爆者た
relief
ちが
law
要
or
求
a
している援
welfare
護法
law,
がそこで出来上がったと。
and
獲
that's how
得
it
できたという
became
ふうに理
created.
解
We are
特
able
に
to achieve.
支援をしていた市民団体
So
が
the many of
で
the
ですね、そういう受け
civil
受け止め
society
方が
and the
大きくて、
organizations
95年に向けてもの
thought
すご
that they
く
were
大きな
able to
私たち
achieve
が信じ
this.
ね、大きな運動になってたのが
So
一気にバ
it,
ッと
and a
熱が
movement
冷
was
めすぎて
becoming bigger and bigger.
で、もう
So
と
the
にかくそれは
major
おかしいというふう
movement
に説明するんですけども、なか
listed
なか、
there.
運動は立て直すということはできなかった。
However, after this, we are not
でし
able
か
to
も
reestablish
その
or
時の法律
rebuilding the
がち
movement.
ょうど社会党と自民党が一緒になった連党でだったか
The
な
Social Party
村山さん
and also
村
the
山さんが党員の
LDP.
時の法律なんですね。
This
大
was
変
the law
環境としては
established
全
when
く
Prime Minister Murayama was in the
大事に
position.
やっちゃったんだというので、でそれ以降だから
And after this,
国
since
保障の
then,
法律を
the
また
law,
きちんと新たに作らせるという運動が非常に困難に今なって
so
き
it
て、
has been
高
very
齢化も進んできてい
difficult to
るということ
recreate
で、
the movement
結
to have
局
create a new law.
戦争被害者全体に対する
So we're trying to have a
未来に関する問題
the
を
state
抱えてるんだというのを
law. We
被
have
爆者援
the
護法もそうやっ
problem
て
in the
ね、言ってくれ
future
てきたんですけ
of
ども、 そ
with
れもなかなか
overall
もう受け継がれなくて、
so the
今日に
victims
来
of
てし
the
まったと
war.
いう感じをしてます。
その民間の空襲被害者との連帯とかそういったこと
So
は
do
どん
you
な取り組
have
み
the
が
like
行
sort
わ
of
れ
a
てきたのか、どんな
solidarity
とこ
or
ろが大事です
collaboration with
か、これまで
others
に。
other
そのあたり
organ
黒岩さ
civil
んにお伺いします。
organization?
田中さんにお伺いします。民間の空襲被害者との連
So
帯
Mr.
というのは
Tanaka, do you
私はや
have
っぱり
that?
戦争被害全体に対する要求として運
So
動
I
がで
think
き
the
なければね、
demand.
原
So if
爆
we
被害
can't
だ
have the
け、原
movement
爆の
for the
被爆者だ
dem-
けの援
to
護法と
demand for the
国
relief
保障とい
law
うのだ
for
けでは
all
やっ
the
ぱり
victims of the
国の
war,
その大方針みたいなのがありますね。責任を取らないという。
we
それを
have
覆すと
we
いう
have
のは
we
難
have we
しい
can't
の
really
で、
make the government
かつての
change
戦
because
争
the
は
government
市
has
民
a
の犠牲が
stance
も
to
う
not
膨
to
大にあるわけです
compensate
よね。そういう犠
the
牲者との連帯をどうしても
provide
必
state's
要だと、
compensation
私は日
to
本
those
代表の役
victims.
員をしていて、必死になって考えたり、
So
い
we've
ろいろ
been
議論
trying
したん
to
です
work,
けども、
think
それが
really
うま
hard
くやっぱり広がっていかなかったと。
and try to
空襲
spread,
の
but
被爆者
didn't
の場合も
really
ですね、
spread well.
死亡者だとかを含む遺族たち
So
にはなかな
those
か広がらない
victims of
で、
areas
障
and
害
so
を
on,
残したね、空襲の被害者たちが自分たち
and
の
those
そ
with
の
the
被害に対しての補償を
disability due
求め
to
た
the
いという
wars,
強い意
they
志があって、
have
そういう人たちの
this
こう集
will
団
to
みたいになっ
demand
て、
the
どうせ行く
compensation.
ということで、大きな、政府の大政策を転換させるような
So
運動に
we
やっぱり
we
やっていけなかったの
we
は
haven't been
残
able
念
to
だった
make
な
the
というふうに思って
movement
お
to
ります
make
し、
a
これは
major
だ
change
からとい
in
ってそれを
administrations
捨ててはいけないことだというふうに思って
administration's
ますので、
decision.
被爆者がいなくても、かつての戦争の犠牲者がいなくてもですね、その
And
理念
even
だ
if
け
we
は、
don't have the
皆さんが
past
高く掲げてですね、
victims, we should probably still
頑張っていただ
hold
きたい
it
というふうに思っ
and
たりしております。
try to work
あ
hard.
りがとうございます。これは先生はいかがでしょうか。
How about you, Mr. Kuroiwa? What do you think?
今ちょっと田中さんのご発言の中で、私どもの運動はですね、生存する障害者だけの運動じゃないと、むしろその
So
方たちはもうすごく高齢になっ
we
てます
not
ので、
just them, but
本当
also
の主力は空襲
the
の孤児さん
main power
と
or
か、
main
2
main
世、3世の方
main
が
people in the
本当の
movement.
主力です。ここはちょっと訂正させていただきたいなと思ってます。
Let me amend that what I said
出産
earlier.
されないけども、法律を
Even
作り
if
たい
you don't
という
get
ので、孤児さんた
leaved,
ちは
there are some
頑張ってるって
people
いうこ
wants
とを
to still be involved in the
ご理解いただきま
movement,
した。
although
私
some people to
一つ
be
考えたのは
relieved
2006年頃です
or
ので、
receive some
もう
relief.
被爆者との対立がまだ残ってましたけども、
There
大
was
きくはな
some
かったなと思ってます。
small
私最初はちょっと別の話なんですけど、
conflict between
被爆者
them
被
and
害者
also
の運動が
Hibakusha.
平和運動と
However,
して認められるのかという、これ
it
深
is
刻
if
な
it was also
問題
like the
提起を
point
しました。
the point
一
that
つ
if
は
it's considered
ロ
as a
シア
peace
の従軍や
movement
の
or
問題
not.
の徴用工の問題とか、日本の加害
So
責
there
任の
are
問題を通して
many
何か
problems
取り組みがあり
Japan
ました。
has as a
そういう真面目
perpetrator
な取り組みから、空襲被害者の運
with
動
the
は
serious
単なる戦
movement
争
or
被
the
害
things
者
they're
被害
working
者意
on.
識だけの運動で、加
Sometimes the
害加
movement
害
is
者の
coming from
責
just
任
as
は
the
何も感じてない
victims,
んじゃないか
and
という
sometimes the
厳
victims
し
may
い
be
指摘を
feeling
受け
their
たことを
damage and they are not
真面目にあります。
feeling their responsibility as a perpetrators became
も
an
ちろんそれ
issue.
議論しただけでは仕方ない真面目な議論だと私は思いましたけれども、
So
私と一つは日本政府、日本が
some
第二
people
次
are very
大戦で
serious, so we
中
couldn't
国に
help
重
it.
機爆撃をしたということで、
Some people
ひどい
think that
ひ
that
どい
was
ことがあって、
emergency
中国の被
bombings
害者たちが、被害者の方たちが東京地方裁判所に
when they went
損
to
害
the
賠償の
central
裁判を起こしてまし
court
て、
and
私
had a
のところで先
lawsuit.
に裁判を起こされてました。で、重平
They
和
had
組
the
の被害
lawsuit
者たち
before
と
us.
いうのは、お互い被害者だということでは交流を深めていきました。
So we had some
で、
exchange
私
because
の
we're
この
both
首について
victims.
は、例えば東大の加藤陽子先生から
For
も、
example,
被害と
Yoko
加害の
Kato
両方
from
結び
Tokyo
結びつけるん
University,
だと
and
いう
they're
ことを
looking
評価してい
into
ただきまし
the
た。
damage
という
of
ことで、
the
私たちも日本の
bombings.
責
And
任というか加害責任は絶対忘れない。
also, we cannot forget about the responsibility of a perpetrator
被爆者とのこ
in a
とは、
war.
もちろん戦争被害受任論をするという意味では全く同じ立場です。
And also, it's the same, we take the same
私が
stance
運動に
for the
参加している時で
acceptance
すけれど
of
も、初めの頃ですけ
theory
ど
of
も、
acceptance.
やっぱり民間空襲被害者にとっては被爆者に対しては非常に複雑な
So
思いを抱え
against
る方がいま
Hibakusha,
し
they
た。
have
要
very
するに戦
complicated
争の
feeling,
障害を
especially
負われ
those
てい
who
る
had
方、
a very
手がなく
serious
なったり、非
disability
常に重要な重傷を負っている方、
and
私
also had a
お話
very
を伺った
serious
時も、
damage.
非常に被爆者に対する
They had
なんで
a
被爆者だけなのよと、
very
私たちには
complex
何も
feeling
ないと
against
すごく
Hibakusha because they
そういう本当に
felt
厳し
that
い
why only they could get
問いかけ
that
と
sort of
い
like
うのがありました。
treatment
そう
because
いう意味では、
they
私自
couldn't
身は
get
とても
anything
感
even
情
they
し
had
ません
a
でしたけれ
serious
ども、
damage or the
被爆者の
disability.
弟の方たちの連帯とか、そういうことを
So
どうす
if
る
we
かとい
think
うこ
of
とは、
that, we have to think how we
本
can
当の
collaborate or work
障害の
together
被害も
amongst
配慮されてました
these
し、
who
私
are
どもも
victims of the
被爆者
wars
との
or
分断は
receive the
図らないとい
damage.
う、具体的にはですね、もう個人の名前言ってしまいますけど、
In detail, if I
原発
mention the
民事裁判
name,
訴訟の全国の原告団長の山本英帝さん、秀樹さんとは、
Hiroo
私ども
Yamamoto,
総会何かに
who
参加していただい
is
て、一緒に
working
理解
in
を深め
another
ていくと
lawsuit, he
いう
was
ことでは、
involved in
私ど
our
も
meeting,
連帯は深めていったつもりです。
and we'd like to
た
deepen
だ、
our
繰り返しになりますけども、現
the
在、
relationship and
私
work
たちの
together.
法律が全くないという、そのためにも自民公明も含めた与党
Also,
から国会に法
we
律を
like
提出さ
that
せるという、今最大の目標で
the
奮闘してます
we
の
like
で、
the
その
parties
ところは
to work hard
な
in
ん
a
ていう
diet
協
and
力を、
talk
も
about
ちろん
this
全面的な協力しながらも、適切な対応をしていきたいな
and
というふうに思って
cooperate
います。
together to have the
はい、ありがとう
appropriate
ございます。
response to
まあ、
these
分断という
issues.
言葉出ましたけれども、これはなんていうんですかね、こう日本政府が作った分断というふうに私たちは認識する必要があるなというふうに
Thank you.
思い
We
ま
need
す。
to work together
民
rather
間
than
の
be
戦争被
divided.
害犠牲者っていうのを全部切り捨てる。で、軍人と一般の人というので、そこでまた身分で切り分けるとかですね、
So
そういうふうな分断を
instead of
国が作って被
separating
害者同士の
those
そ
in
う
the
いうこうすがすが
military
な感情が生ま
versus
れてきたということは、
civilians,
私たち忘れてはならないのではないかというふうに
we
思い
need
ます。
to
で、
remember
その分断とい
that
うと
in
ころで
some
言います
ways
と、今ちょっと
we have
ご報
all
告という
endured
点に関して、死没
Now, going back to the issue of state compensation,
やはり未だに残された被爆者、原爆被害者の援護の問題っていうところもあるかと思います。
we'll
それが私がこれ
still
まで
need
に
to
取
talk
材
about
してきた分
relief.
野にしてみても、同じ原爆被害
I've been
者だと
following the Black Rain trials
被
for a
爆
while
者と
now.
いうふうに認められる人とそうではない人っていうことが
Uh,
どうしても
there
言われ
has
てし
been
まう
some
ので、
ongoing
戦
debate
後時代
on
に残され
whether
た課題
people
とし
can be
てあるの
categorized
か
as
なというふう
hibakusha
に
or
思っていま
not.
す。ここでちょっと足立先生にお伺いしたいと
So
思うんです
now
けれ
I'd
ど
like
も、
to ask
足立先生はこう広
Mr.
島の黒
Adachi,
岩訴訟、そして長崎の被
you
爆
were
体
part of the
験訴
Black
訟、
Rain
広島長崎の被爆
trials
2世というありとあらゆ
and the
る
atomic
学者
bomb
にもいらっ
survivor
しゃる裁判
trials.
関わっていらっしゃると思いますけれども、この点についてどんなふうに乗り越えていく
And
のか、また
during
今後
these
未来的に
trials,
も
how do we
関係性で考えるこ
overcome
とがあれば
the
教えていた
walls?
だきたいですけれども、いかがでしょうか。
今残っているですね、裁判の関
So,
係で
the
いうと、
ongoing
黒
trials,
雨
let me
の二
touch
次訴
upon the
訟と、
Black
それ
Rain
から
trials
長崎の体験者訴訟は、
and
少
the
なく
trials
と
in
も
Nagasaki.
援護法、被爆者援護法がありますから、
I
そ
do
こに
think at
どう
least
や
we
っ
have
て
the
認めさせる
relief
か、
law.
特にその
What matters is whether these individuals will
被爆
be
の影響
seen
できるだ
as
け小
hibakusha
さ
or
く
not.
見せたいというのが、日本政府、アメリカ
The
がそういう
Japanese
考え方ですか
government,
ら、それ
influenced
に基
by
づ
the
いて
American
放射線
government,
効果物
want
を残す
to
という影
minimize
響を
or
それにもたら
undermine
される内部被爆をものを
the
利用したい、
hibakusha and
という
their
のが基本的な
issues.
考え方で、そこで、せめぎ合い
That is the
を
base of this
して
issue.
いるのが現状なので、国家保障の問題と直接関わってくるわけでは
So
ない
while
んで
this
す
doesn't
ね。
seem
それ
directly
とあと
related to
国家保障の問題
the
で言ったら、
state
今
compensation issue,
2世も
we
どち
need
らかとい
to
うと援護法の枠の延長みたいなところで戦って
realize
きたんですけれ
whether
ど、
the second
在
generation
外被爆者
hibakusha
につ
will
い
be
ては
included
全くそ
in the
の
relief law
受任論というかね、
or
戦
not.
争被害は国民が等しく受けて
I
こ
would
れは
like
日
to
本
go
国民が
back
ただろうみたいな、
to
そういうおか
the
しげな
issue
論理で
of
否定されてきて、
the
その部分は
endurance
少なくと
doctrine.
も日本の被爆者と同じにするというレベルでは乗り越えてきたわけで、で、そ
We have
の受任
overcome
論
a
が
lot in the
受任
past
論
few
が
decades.
出てきて、それが精緻なものに整理されたのが、もともとこれ田中さんおっしゃったようにカナダの在外資産の
But
裁
when
判
we talk about
が
the
の
endurance
判決で
doctrine
出てきた考
and
え
what
方
went
で、
on
そ
in
れを
Canada,
1980年ぐらいに、
in about 1980,
基本原爆基本問題懇談会という、そう
we
いう基本法で出て
established
きた考
a
え方に
committee
入れ
to
られ、それ
address
が被爆の領域では
the issues of the
科
hibakusha.
学的根拠、科学的
We
根
need
拠が
to
ないから
try to
ダメ
look
みたい
at
なことを言
scientific
ってくる
evidence.
時の理屈
Sometimes the
で、
argument is
要
that
する
there is
に
none.
なんていうかな、できるだけ広げたくない戦争被害
And the reason
によ
behind
っ
this
て
is
救済
because
される人を広げたくない。
the more
だから被爆
people
者だ
receive
けは、
compensation
単に空襲で被害を
for
受けただけじゃな
what
く
happened in
て、
the war,
その後病
that
気になったり
makes
働けな
the
くなった
war a
りし
bigger
た、
issue.
ずっとそういう被害が続いてるみたいな
There
気持ち
are
で、
a myriad of
被爆者だ
victims,
けは
those
特別
including
に
people who
しま
cannot
し
work
ょうみたいなこ
anymore,
とでね、
people who lost their
してたん
lives,
だけれども、できるだけ被
people
害
who
を小
got
さく見せたいわ
injured
けだから、そこで線引きをして
through
く
the
る
eyes
と
of
いう
the
ところで、
government.
現
You
在
want to
裁判で
minimize
後々
the
の被害
damage that
総額
was
が
incurred
増えて
throughout
い
the
る
entire war.
ということではないのかなと思っています。
The easiest way is
はい、ありが
to
とうございます。
tell people to
そうですね、先ほどちょっ
endure
と国家保障の問題とは
as
直接関わ
individuals.
ってくるわけではないというところ、ちょっと
So
どう議論を
while
展開しようかなと思っ
things
たんですけ
may
れど
or
も、
may
ちょっ
not
といろいろこう、被爆
relate
業の以前
directly
のですね、
to
資料
state
を探してますと、
compensation,
特に被
if you
爆
look
2世と3世
through
のこ
any
とで言いますと、日本
materials
日本被
that the
団協のホーム
Hidankyo
ページ見ますと、
has,
原爆
for
被害
example, their
者、
homepage,
援護法、被団協として求めている日本
you'll
に、
find
法律の案というか、そういったものが読めるんですけれども、そこ
more
にはですね、
information about the
法律、被
Hidankyo
爆者以外に出
and the
没さ
main
れるその子供、孫
objectives.
も含めて要求していることを適用してくださいということが書かれてあるので、やはりそういった意味でも日本被団協としても、そして彼ら当事者たちですね、求
So
めているこ
whether
と、裁
you
判をかかっ
are
ている方や、それ以
a
外の方
member
々
of the
も含めて、その
Hidankyo
思いというの
or
は
a
まだ届いて
victim
いな
of
い。
the
そういった
war
意味で
through
も課題は
various
まだまだ残され
means,
ているんだな
there
という
are
ことを
still
すご
many
く感じて
challenges
いたりいたし
ahead.
ます。
So I still have many, many questions, but we only have about 10 minutes left. So first, let's see if we can get any questions from the audience. All right, we saw a hand go up. Let me hand you a mic. Okay, the man in the front, you will be next. Thank you, Mr. Terumi. It's nice to see you. I know that you invited a Korean hibakusha to the Oslo ceremony. And you invited them in as an official member. I know that there was another global hibakusha who was invited, who is from Brazil. You've also been inclusive and have mentioned an American victim to nuclear testing. And you all went together to the ceremony. I think this is beautiful. I'm sure that this is because of your long fight. I know that the Korean and American atomic bomb survivor really go back to the trials that was brought up by other hibakusha from around the world. And I want you to know, as the co-chair of the Hidankyo, were you always inclusive? Did you always include global hibakusha in your activities? I know that you invited other hibakusha to MPT review conferences. And in another trial regarding medical fees, did you feel any frustration or conflict about including those in your fight? I'm sure that many people around the world, from the US, Brazil, Korea, they all felt like they were aided tremendously by your activities. Thanks to you, they were able to receive some compensation. And I'm sure that this was one of the reasons why you were awarded the prize and why you invited other people to the ceremony from Brazil, from the US, from Korea. I think this is a wonderful thing. And I know that Adachi-san mentioned this, but as the Hidankyo, if you had mentioned some sort of message, some sort of apology to the other hibakusha from the Korean Peninsula, perhaps that would have put you on the map. Perhaps that would have made you gain even more recognition. When you think about the fight that you have going forward, how international do you think you can get? will you be helping other hibakusha, other victims of perhaps nuclear testing too, in your activities? I would love to work with you when we think about how the hibakusha are aging rapidly as years go on. We need to work with other generations across international borders. So let's work with global hibakusha even more moving forward, using this year, the 80th anniversary of the atomic bombing. I really, really would love that for you. And I am sure that this is an issue that will be brought up in the International Committee. So please consider my plea. Thank you. I think there's a lot of things we need to add. So let's have one more question.
So I am providing a medical treatment. I was in a lawsuit of asbest, and there to have relief on those victims of asbest with a lawsuit. When I heard that Hidankyo received this Nobel Peace Prize and heard the speech and so on, I've heard a lot of law-related talk. The radiation due to the war is very special or specific. It's like a genocide because a lot of people died at the same time. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and air raids in Tokyo, and in Germany, maybe Dresden, the person Dresden. In our human history, it was the first time that it was targeted, and also the Nanjing massacre was also genocide. So I believe that it's very different from others. If we think of the international court, would you like to answer? I'm not sure if it's going to be a direct answer. However, when we talk about the trial about the victims of the radiation, of the atomic bomb, it hasn't been done because no other atomic bomb has been dropped. So I'm thinking there'll be no other case. Because if it's going to be dropped once again, then maybe we're going to lose this human society. So thinking of how we are thinking, like how we can do relief law, how we are going to compensate, maybe we don't even have to think about. If you're talking about how other victims against the Japanese administration and also the air raids in Dresden in Germany, how actually the trial was held and how they fought against. I am not very familiar with them. And rather than taking it to the trial to win, I think that we should be going for the society. We don't even need to go to the trial. I think you have many more questions, but however, we don't have any much more time. So I am very sorry. Maybe it might be my fault, and I really apologize. Sorry that I haven't been able to respond to your questions. However, I'll be happy if it became an opportunity for you to be able to deepen your thought or thinking. I'm very sorry, but we don't have much time. However, I'd like to spare one more minute to have a last comment. Maybe Tanaka, Mr. Tanaka, you can go last.
何
はい
大丈夫です。
あ向こうから
So,
今、弟の議連まで自民公明も入った議連ですけ
so we
ども、
talked about
法
LDP
律案
and
条項案
Kome.
が私どもに示されまして、
We're talking the
前
different
文の中
parties.
に戦争被害受忍論で今までは救済しなかった。この度救済するという。
We are talking about we are going to leave this time. That was included. I think that was a big thing. But if we become too happy, then they may say stop it. But I think it should be the way it is. So Japanese constitution that was made and LDP that is involved, creating this is a big step. And a lot of hibakushas who are passing away as well. More people are passing away, so I think that it is important.
私の方からは、
For myself,
最後に申し上げました、
the
ま
last
だ被爆者
comment I
の
made
訴えられていない
earlier,
その裁判を
there are
やってい
other
くわけで、特に
lawsuits,
長崎の体験者と
especially
広島の黒雨
in
の
Nagasaki
取り
and
扱いは全
also
く違うこ
the
とを、まず
the
第一
black
に
rain
何度
cases.
か
They are
さ
quite
せる必
different.
要があるなという
So
こと
I
で頑張
have
ってま
to
いりたいと思っており
somehow
ます。
win
以上で
these
ございます。
trials.
じゃあ、一言だけ。
And just one comment.
私たちは平和の中で自分たち
Among
の人生を
the
送りたい
peace,
というふうに思ってるんですね。
we like to have
私は
our
ですね、
life
日本国憲法が言うように、平和
as
は
the
戦勝
Japanese
国民の公正
constitution
と市民に
states.
信頼して、そういう中で生きる
By
ことは可能だというふう
trusting,
に思ってるんです。けれども今、
I
日本の
think it
政府
is
は
possible. However,
君た
Japanese
ちがもし
government
平和を
says
望むんであるなら
if
ば、
you
ア
wish
メ
to
リカの
have
核を
peace,
傘に依存しな
you
さい
should
と
be
こういう
under
政
the
策です。
nuclear
そういう意味で
umbrella
は
of
す
the
ると
United
私たちは非
States.
常に大きな分岐点に立ってるんです。
That is
そうい
where
う
like
思いを
we
して
are
おりま
coming
す。
to the
以上です。
intersection. That's how I think.
皆さん、今日はご意見もご質問も
Everyone, thank you very much
ご
for
質問
your
もご意見もまだ
comments,
たくさんおありじゃ
questions.
ないか
I'm
と
sure you
思うん
have
ですね。
more.
だから本当はもう少しお聞きしたい。
So I
聞きた
wish
か
I
った
was
こともあるん
able
です
to
が、ぜ
listen
ひ
to
なん
your
か紙
comments
に
and
入ってるの
questions
を
more.
ですね、
If you could
残し
take
て
a
いただけれ
note,
ばありが
can
たい
you
し、
can write down on a piece of
日
paper
本
or
被団協
something
に例えば質問と
and
か
send
そういう
it
のを出し
send
ていただ
them
ければで
to
きない
us
の
to
で、
Nihon Hidankyo.
お答えを出してい
I'll be able
き
to
ますという
respond
ふうに思っております。
to those questions. Thank you. Thank you very much for participating, everyone. The assignment we think we still have to work on. But however, this is not something we should just leave it to the Nihon Hidankyo. With our civil society and private sectors, we should all work together. Thank you very much.